In this video, we will describe how to monitor and evaluate the implementation of the security measures we developed and discuss how the cyclic nature of the whole process can help us improve risk management in general. So we developed our security measures and implementation plan and started implementing the measures. Now, how do we know if the implementation is actually working? How can we improve the risk management process? As you remember, all the tasks in the implementation plan looked like person to do something. This sometimes included developing or updating rules or policies. So an obvious next step would be to ask every person responsible for implementing the tasks what they have accomplished, what they have not accomplished, what they still need to do to accomplish the tasks. However, the problem is not knowing what needs to be done like it was for security measures. The problem here is how to do it, who needs to do it, and when. Let's take a look at a simplified version of the monitoring and evaluation process step by step and describe the roles of the people involved. First of all, let's discuss who should be in charge of monitoring and evaluation. After developing an implementation plan, the management of an organization is going to need information about how the implementation is going. When we refer to management, we mean the person or the group of people in the organization who make decisions. Of course, every organization is different, and who is making decisions highly depends on the organizational structure, which might be hierarchical or horizontal. It is important to remember that the responsibility of the risk management process lies on the decision makers and should not be delegated. The person checking the implementation of the tasks and providing management with information on how the implementation is going could be someone internal, including management, provided that they are not involved in the implementation of the tasks. The person who is responsible for the tasks cannot check how they are being implemented because self-checks don't work in the field of security. If there is no one in the organization who is not involved in the implementation process, management can decide to ask someone external to initiate the monitoring and evaluation process. If needed, an external consultant would also be able to help in the previous stages of the risk management process. In such cases, we could agree with the external consultant to conduct the monitoring and evaluation process at some point after implementation has begun. Management can also decide to rely on both internal people and external consultants. This is also fine. Someone internal could initiate the monitoring and evaluation process and agree with external consultants to check in on progress after a certain amount of time. It is up to the management to choose what works best for the organization. In case you are operating individually and not in the framework of an organization, a self-check might be the only option. You might be the only one checking if you have accomplished the tasks and how the implementation went. Now that we have established the who, let's think about when to conduct our monitoring and evaluation process. How long after the start of the implementation process should you start the monitoring and evaluation process? A week? A month? 2 months? What do you think? The answer is, it depends on the context. It depends on the nature of the tasks, their complexity, and the context in which the organization works. If we expect the first results in 2 weeks, it is totally fine to start the monitoring and evaluation activities 2 weeks after the implementation process began. This helps us know whether the process is working so we can make changes and corrections as soon as possible. Or if we are confident that the initial phases of the implementation process are working, we may decide to start the monitoring and evaluation process later, maybe a month or 2 after starting the implementation. You are best placed to decide on the timeline depending on how your organization works and the context you operate in. You may identify different timelines for different tasks depending on their deadlines or your needs, or decide to have weekly, monthly, or bi-monthly check-ins on all the tasks. Now let's have a closer look at what is monitored and evaluated. This is the moment that the designated evaluator collects information about which tasks have been implemented by the responsible staff, which ones were not and why, which ones are currently in progress, what are the problems, and what's needed to accomplish the tasks. Let's take an example from our list of security measures from our video on developing and implementing security measures. Our risk was threat actor confiscates our devices, computer, smartphone, etc. The agreed security measure was person until date to configure devices, including full disk encryption, passwords, and auto-blocking, etc. Create, update rules policy on the configurations, check the configurations regularly. The evaluator will ask the person responsible to report back. The evaluator should ask whether or not they configured devices and how they did so. Did they configure all of them, part of them, or none of them? Were they able to draft rules or policies on the configurations? Were they able to perform regular checks on these configurations? In case security measures were not implemented, the evaluator should get more information because it's important to understand why. As we explained, not all measures have the same timeline of implementation, and it is okay to have some measures not yet implemented while others are being done. Based on the reasons why measures were not implemented, management can try to improve the situation or make security measures more manageable for staff. The clearer, more actionable, time-bound, and realistic the assigned tasks are, the more we increase the chance of successful implementation. The evaluator will give management a list of tasks outlining the results. This output includes what's been done and what hasn't, what's in progress, anything needed for the completion of certain tasks, and notes on potential problems. Management will also receive a general evaluation of whether the implementation works, doesn't work at all, or works partially. Getting this evaluation of the implementation status is not always a given. It is important to set up direct communication channels to ensure that staff responsible for the implementation is able to get in contact with management if any issue arises. Once the evaluator shares the results of the monitoring and evaluation process with management, it is time to initiate discussions on these results and for management to start making decisions. We will illustrate this step with examples of possible decisions management could make as a result of this discussion. For our first example, let's consider a scenario in which the evaluator discovered that nothing happened or can happen because of various reasons. Perhaps it was unclear who was responsible for implementing what, there were no resources, or the person responsible was overworked and burned out. What would you do in this case? The discussion between management and the other people involved might result in canceling the existing implementation plan. They may acknowledge their failure to implement the security measures and don't see the possibility of fixing the implementation plan now. They cancel the existing implementation plan and agree to start the risk management cycle from the very beginning, taking into account what they have learned so far. Let's think about a similar but slightly different second scenario. Like in the previous one, the evaluation revealed that nothing is happening and can't happen because of various reasons. However, in this case, because of the nature of some risks, management and other people involved in the discussion on the monitoring and evaluation results decide that there is one main, supercritical risk that they still need to mitigate as soon as possible. What can management do? What would you do in their shoes? As an option, management might decide to cancel the old implementation plan and create a new, simpler plan aimed at reducing only one risk in the simplest way possible. For example, in the case of the risk threat actor gets access to our email accounts and chats in messaging apps, management could decide to configure staff members' accounts to protect them in case this event occurs. Or if there is no internal capacity, management could ask for external assistance. In our example, a consultant could be hired to configure all the accounts. This would only be a temporary solution, not a systematic one, but for the moment it would really reduce the risk. As a third example, let's say our evaluator discovered that some of the tasks were accomplished. Here the main question management needs to ask is, were the main measures and parts of tasks accomplished? Have the task completed reduced the risks to an acceptable level? If the main tasks have been implemented and the answer is yes, we can say the implementation is actually working. If the answer is no, management can decide what to do. What could be done to improve the implementation? Depending on the reasons why the main tasks were not accomplished, some of the options could be delegating the main task to another person in the organization or to an external consultant, or allocating more resources to the main tasks. As the best case scenario, let's say the evaluator assessed that all the main tasks were accomplished. This is rather rare, but if that is the case, it means that the organization is totally capable of making and implementing decisions in relation to their security. This doesn't mean that the organization should stop engaging in the risk management process. What about the general improvement of the risk management process? The cyclic, never-ending nature of the risk management process is key here. The main idea is extremely simple. Run one cycle, capture lessons learned from the various stages, and apply them to the following cycle. And we continuously repeat this. This way, our risk management process will become better and better over time. We should document our risk management process and these improvements, for example, in our security policy if we have any. Every time we go through the risk management cycle, we discover what's realistic to implement, the capacity and pace it takes to make changes, what resources are available, and when it's best to start the process, for example, during a period when we don't have massive workload. Repeating everything is the last stage of the risk management process. Why is this stage so important? Because everything is in flux. We are changing, the context is changing, therefore the main risks, problems, and their measures, solutions are changing too. If we continue to protect ourselves from the risks we had 3 years ago, well, we might be protecting ourselves from risks that don't exist anymore and end up not protecting ourselves from the actual new risks we are facing. If the security context is changing fast, new legislation, new area of activities we conduct, or new incidents started happening, we shouldn't wait until next year before starting a new cycle again. We should restart our risk management process immediately. Our risk management process should be a systematic, continuous, and never-ending process.